Thank you, Saliba, for the kind introduction. As Dr. Sarsar mentioned, aside from being the executive assistant to Surata Rabia, I am also the special programs coordinator. And I am very proud to introduce to you one of the programs that I coordinate that is closest to my heart. If you'll please join me in watching the 7-minute video.
Holy Land Christian Ecumenical Foundation is proud to announce the opening of the Bethlehem Museum. 30 years after the initial idea was proposed by the Arab Women's Union, HCEF have made this dream a reality. The Bethlehem Museum is dedicated to fostering a deeper understanding and appreciation for the role Palestinian Christians play in preserving Palestine's heritage, identity, and culture. The museum will introduce all who visit Bethlehem not only to the historical treasures of Palestine, but more importantly to the lifeblood of Christianity in the Holy Land, its people. They are the living stones, Palestinians who have kept the faith alive for thousands of years. The museum honours them by recognising and showcasing their many contributions to the Holy Land's faith, traditions, art and culture, while also building community. It also houses artefacts dating from the Canaanite and Roman periods, contributed by the Ministry of Tourism and Antiquities. Amongst the collection is a Canaanite jar, the oldest artefact at 3,800 years old, and glass from the Roman and Byzantine periods. One of the most important artefacts on display is a Bible, the oldest owned by Bethlehemite families, and originally printed in 1875 by Dominican fathers in Mosul, Iraq. The museum also features examples of mother-of-pearl artistry from the collections of Michael Frisch and Hananiah families. First introduced as a craft in Palestine by Franciscan monks in the late 16th century, and having flourished in the Bethlehem area particularly, this traditional handicraft is a source of strong Palestinian national and artistic pride. The museum also features the olive wood collection of the Zachariah family. As pioneers of the craft in their original home of Ein Karam, Jerusalem, the family brought their trade to Bethlehem following their expulsion from their home during the 1948 Nakba. Here, as the first craftsmen of their kind, they passed their knowledge on to Bethlehemites, and today olive wood carving is one of the most quintessential Palestinian crafts. Within the collection is the oldest example of Palestinian olive wood carving, standing testament to the continuous presence of Palestinian Christians in the Holy Land. The Livingstone's exhibit devotes space to the cultural and social life of Bethlehemites in the 19th century, particularly through the use of original photographs from the period. Also present is stonework from the collections of Akram Anastas, the Arab Women's Union, the Hush family, and HCEF, documenting the existence of Christians in Palestine for many generations. The museum also houses the most important collection of Palestinian embroidery, gathered from the diaspora and brought home to Palestine with the generous help and support of Hanan and Farah Munayyer. The Munayyer collection includes traditional costumes and styles of various regions of Palestine, and the support of such a collection played a central role in securing further contributions for the success of the museum. The museum's priceless treasures is the Roman Aqueduct, which lies beneath the museum. Among the most significant archaeological sites in Bethlehem, the aqueduct from the Roman era is preserved and on display throughout the museum. We are proud to display an artifact of such historical importance for Palestine and its ancient cities. One modern piece is that of a cross with 2 parts. The outside cross is crafted from olive wood, a symbol of peace. The inside is cut from the separation wall, which divides the Holy Land. This is to represent the suffering inflicted by the wall on all people of the Holy Land. With Bethlehem surrounded by the wall, this piece serves to represent the cross the Palestinians bear every day, and the fact that all are crucified by it. The Palestinian Surprises exhibit is one you won't find anywhere else in Palestine. This unique exhibit highlights the achievement of Palestinians from all walks of life and their contribution to the respective countries they live in around the world. Palestinian Surprises is a project of Know Thy Heritage leadership program, which empowers youth in the diaspora. And this section honours the great Saeed Khoury, who dedicated his life to Palestine. Bethlehem Museum also presents an art gallery to support budding artists, offering a place for them to showcase their work. The museum also actively works to preserve authentic Palestinian cuisine through Al Kama restaurant, providing economic opportunity in the process. The museum also houses a small gift shop through which we are proud to support local traditional artisans and charities like Man Lil Hayat Lash Bethlehem and Al Malath Charitable Society, which support people with intellectual and physical disabilities, as well as the Salesian Artistic Centre of Bethlehem. Bethlehem Museum is one of HCEF's greatest accomplishments because it embodies so many of the values and goals we stand for. We hope that after your visit, you leave the museum with a greater understanding of Palestine's rich history, a greater appreciation of the Palestinian people's culture, and the satisfaction of knowing your visit is supporting a vibrant community that has valiantly withstood the sands of time.
I hope that video expressed why it's one of my favorite projects of HCF. His Eminence Metropolitan Joseph touched upon some of the reasons why projects like the Bethlehem Museum are important when he reminded us that in losing our history, we lose our identity. If we don't understand our past, how can we hope for a future? He also mentioned that grace gives new life. The Bethlehem Museum is one of those graces which not only helps preserve Palestine's heritage, identity, and culture, but gives us hope for a brighter future. And here to develop this topic further is a woman I greatly admire. Dr. Cynthia Finlayson is an associate professor in the Department of Anthropology at Brigham Young University. She has extensive experience in archaeological excavation and cultural heritage site development in Syria and Jordan. She is the current director of the Ad-Dir Monument and Plateau Project in Petra, Jordan, and is acting director of the Syro-American expeditions to both Palmyra and Apamea. She is an impressive woman, and it is our privilege to have her as a consultant to the Bethlehem Museum. Please join me in welcoming Dr. Cynthia Finlayson.
I think it's Abby that's the impressive woman on this stage with everything she does. First of all, I'd like to thank HCEF for giving all of us who are involved in this project, and that includes you, the opportunity to do something extremely positive, but also hopefully extremely long-lasting. I'm going to talk about today some of the topics I briefly went through as far as identity at a board meeting last March, but I'm going to use some of the same images but take a different tack. But before I do that, I'd just like to recognize a few important people. Over on the table on the left here are my students this semester for Museum Studies who have volunteered their time. They have paid their own way to come here for this conference, to volunteer and help, and their projects for the next umpteen years are going to be involved with the Bethlehem Museum. Thanks to them, and made possible by the hospitality of Rosia and Rata Brabi. These students could afford to come because they're staying in the basement of the Rabis, so they didn't have to pay for hotels. So do you guys stand up? Thank you. I'm very, very proud of them. And thank you for all of your hospitality, Rosia. Thank you. Okay. Yay, Rosia. Today I'd like to talk a little bit about why HCF has a museum in Bethlehem, of all places in the world. And I need to talk about what the ideal roles of museums are. Some people, I'm surprised to find, think that museums just host dead things and that's all they do, and from dead cultures and other entities. Museums are critically important on many, many levels. Identity is memory, and memory is identity. And without a shared memory, an individual, a culture, or an entire country and society disappear. It's often the functions of museums to enhance and restore memory or to save it. So some of the other critical roles of museums that HCF is envisioning for the Bethlehem Museum to acquire is to educate with accurate and unbiased information, to explore and provide a forum for asking critical questions, to preserve those objects and stories deemed of critical significance to a community or a society, to validate and preserve identity, often linked to geographical place, and in the case of Palestine, that is probably one of the most important aspects of a museum's role within its community. To celebrate different identities associated with ethnicity, race, and cultural paradigms in such a way as to make them understandable and appreciated by all. To explain differences associated with religious or other identities that encourage mutual respect and understanding. To do research on its collections and other museum holdings and share this information with the public via exhibitions, publications, and other programs. To serve the surrounding community, region, and foreign visitors with public outreach programs based on the museum's collections and the educational needs of each of these museum audiences, including differing age groups. In order to survive as both individuals and as a society, all cultures have developed systems and structures, objects and rituals to help them remember these things that are needful if a community is to be strong, including but not limited also to 1, individuals and moments that have shaped the past, 2, beliefs and habits which should determine the future. These point to what the society has been in order to build a viable future and determine what it wants to be. I want to point out an interesting story to you. I don't know if you're probably all familiar with the Siege of Stalingrad during World War II and how devastating that siege was. The city was cut off by Nazi forces. They attempted to starve out the city. They bombarded it practically 24/7. During that time period, a huge percentage of the population of that city perished, not only from wounds of battle, but also from starvation and disease. In the midst of that, do you know what institutions were left open for the people? Museums, concert halls, libraries. It's important not only to feed the individual itself, but to feed the soul of that individual, to build resistance. These are aspects of what we could call cultural resistance that give people strength. In the face of the current onslaughts of the modern age, museums are one of the most important cultural tools to combat social oblivion. They are especially needed for populations under stress in order to provide a foundation of stability. And certainly Bethlehem is a society under stress. The most important role, however, of a museum is to be a vehicle of transformation for the visitor. A vehicle of transformation. The ideal goal is to have a visitor come to a museum and be changed in some fashion or form by what they experience, what they learn, what they see. Often societies use many different things, not just objects. They can use costume, which is very important here in Palestine. Festivals, theaters, plays, dances, poetry, language, genealogical research, constructed spaces that encourage memory and explore and celebrate architecture. A museum becomes, therefore, a kind of communal memory device where objects become reunited with stories of the past and present, which goes beyond the function of museums as simply repositories of historical preservation. Memory not only gains a voice to inform, but to move emotions and to preserve identity. This is especially one of the most important roles of the modern museum that it has been miraculously opened. And I hope you all realize what a miracle it is to have a museum of this type opened up in Bethlehem within a block and a half of the wall. I just want to leave you with a quote from one of our students in the class this semester, and all of them are fantastic. I have been blessed with the most wonderful students this semester. I'd like Kelly to stand up, please. And Kelly didn't know I was going to do this afternoon, so I hope she's not embarrassed. Thanks, Kelly. This is from a paper. They're required to do a paper every week on their readings, and they had just finished some readings in Jonathan Dimbleby's book on the Palestinians. This is how she summed up her experience and what we've been talking about. Quote, "The modern museum, unlike its ancient counterpart, is now recognized and prized not only as the safehold of the public's possessions, but as a source for cultural knowledge as well. While a museum still maintains certain aspects of its original purpose as a storehouse for antiquities and curiosities, as a public trust, its primary responsibility in the modern age is to accurately educate and to give voice to the diverse groups within the public for whom it is steward. However, despite the vast number of improvements that the museum world has initiated to better conform to this mission, the controversial events that are happening and have happened in Palestine indicate that this mission has not yet been accomplished, and the need for museums is greater than ever. Perhaps the most elusive responsibility of a museum is its obligation to preserve and protect cultural memory. The Palestinian situation, though an extreme case, is a quintessential example of why museums are so necessary in society. Despite the inescapable fact that all belong to the same human species, people so often take sides to promote their own agendas over the well-being of those different from them. They offend and destroy, reaching cultural structures that they do not understand, or trivialize customs that some hold in the highest regard. They question others' rights to be, while asserting their own superiority. It is this cultural ignorance and ethnocentric arrogance that continues to cause the majority of the world's conflicts. In order to counter these problems, museums as lighthouses of knowledge and perspective are essential in preserving cultural memory and identity, for they give voice to those who are held in silent submission and lack just representation among the dominating members of the public," unquote. So I would conclude and hopefully ask some questions, if you wish, by talking about how important this museum is in a form of positive resistance. It provides validation for the Christian population in Palestine, as well as others in Palestine, to counter this daily stress that individuals are experiencing in this region, but also educate anyone who comes to that museum, including foreign tourists. It's feeding the soul as well as the body. And hopefully the young man that we heard about this morning, who has to drive around Bethlehem because that's the only way that he can release the stress that he's under, These kinds of programs can provide other positive avenues to reduce that stress and validate his value in society. Some of the things that are envisioned for this museum to be discussed in the future, already we have planned an exhibition at the Museum of Peoples and Cultures on BYU campus. This is the training museum for students. They have to do everything from the beginning research of coming up with the design, the topic, the exhibition layout, the exhibition panels, all the research behind those, all the labeling, and then mount it themselves. This will feature the Bethlehem Museum collection and the Arab Christian communities in the Holy Land. We hope that this museum will become a center for the training of collections experts and cultural heritage management individuals cooperating with our students in the Jerusalem Center, along with the staff of the Museum of Bethlehem staff, and any invited guests that they would like to have from the University of Bethlehem and the Palestinian Antiquities Authority. This is one of an essential need in the Middle East. In all the Arab countries I have worked in, there is not a viable, credentialed museum studies training program. Jordan has tried recently at Heshmat University, but it still isn't up to where it should be. It is desperately needed because, as you all know, this region of the world hosts some of the most important archeological and cultural heritage collections and sites in the entire world. And we don't have the professionals to protect them and to interpret them. So this will provide, hopefully, job training and employment for the future. We hope this museum eventually will be developed, become a nexus to start to think about bringing all of the artworks, all of the cultural heritage objects that are associated with Palestinian culture home from the diaspora to a home where they belong. And I have other things I could mention, like a project on developing a genealogical database for the families of Bethlehem. We've got some other things we've been talking about with a database in Jerusalem that is available for the families there, but also for those in the diaspora trying to research their backgrounds and their identity. Thank you very much.
Does anyone have any questions for Professor Finlayson? We can take one. No.
Bless you guys for staying all afternoon and this late in the afternoon after such a long day. Oh no, Rosia's going to grill me.
I would never do that. No, first of all, Cindy, thank you so much for coming, for being a true friend. And I would just wanted to thank the students that without your help, this would not have been a success. It's been very easy, this conference, with your help here. But I do wanted to ask you, Cindy, about the museum. You know, the museum is so young. It's only 3 years old.
Barely 2 years.
Barely 2 years old. How can we as individuals help sustain it so that it can go on?
Oh, great question. Museums are interesting animals to keep running and funded, but this is a more than unusual situation where we're dealing with a country that is occupied with a population that is economically stressed. And so one of the biggest thing that is needed right now, if you have any way to provide funds specifically for this project, if you are putting together a will or a trust where you can put an endowment in as far as stocks that can give us a regular income during the year for HCEF, anything that can provide some stability as far as funding. It's the first 10 years of a museum are the hardest to get it off the ground, and to build these kinds of financial forces of stability behind it, but particularly in this instance where our patrons from the local community, usually a museum goes to them for funding. We can do that, but of course you know what the economic situation is, particularly in Bethlehem right now. And I'm sure we'll get lots of volunteers to do volunteer time and be involved in the museum programs, but they are very strapped financially. So that's one or two of the ways that this museum could be greatly assisted. Okay, thank you.